I've been in a cow byre since I was in my pram. Maybe cows are that comfort blanket I just never threw away. I'm married to Victoria, and we have 2 sons, George and Baden, seen here at the American Civil War Museum in Gettysburg, on the cultural leg of my Nuffield journey. We live in the Cotswolds, where I manage a dairy farm, farming above the 800-foot contour. When we moved there, the locals told me it was a tough farm, cold in the winter, and the first in the county to burn off in the summer. In that first year, I heard about these deep-rooting, herb-rich pasture mixtures and decided that they would suit our situation. I did some background reading books written between the turn of the last century and the mid-1950s. Until then, I'd been told that the growing of high-yielding, high-quality forage crops depended upon balanced pH, good P&K indices, and nitrogen inputs managed to give a long growing season. However, these authors didn't mention any of this. They all made various derogatory remarks at the expense of artificials. Instead, the growing of quality pasture, they said, depended upon this stuff called humus. At the same time, Acres USA magazine ran the occasional article on soil carbon. I soon realized that these complex carbon-rich compounds and humus were the same thing. I was intrigued and wanted to know more. I realized that to learn more, I needed to travel, and Nuffield seemed the obvious excuse to do so. I'm very grateful to Nuffield, and in particular Central Region Farmers Trust, for sponsoring me, and to my employer, Mrs. Clark, without whose support my journey would not have been possible, and to my family for their support, encouragement, and sarcastic advice. On my journey, I discovered that fertility builds sustainability. A fertile soil is one rich in biology and carbon, not just good chemical indices. Building a biologically active, carbon-rich soil builds resilience into a farm. This resilience to extreme weather patterns is essential for sustainable food production. In May 2011, I hopped on a plane, destination Wisconsin, USA, and the start of a 6-week road trip through the northeastern quarter of the United States. First stop was Otter Creek Organic Farm, the home of Gary Zimmer, farmer, consultant, educator, and MD of a fertilizer company. Gary emphasized the need to manage for biology in the soil. These microbes, the bacteria and fungi, are at the heart of a productive soil. He used the incorporation of cover crops to feed the microbes and appropriate cultivation techniques to provide an ideal habitat for their survival. He used humate-rich, balanced fertilizers to supply any nutrients which were lacking in the soil. In this way, his organic farm was producing high-quality crops which were equaling or out-yielding those of his conventional neighbors. His dairy cows were high-yielding, healthy animals, producing over 60% heifer calves. As Gary says, nature favors the female. At Cal West Seeds at La Crosse, Wisconsin, the use of these methods had transformed their slumped, compacted, waterlogged, weed-ridden soils. By incorporating a large amount of biomass over a 2-year period, their soils have become open, friable, and weedless. This resulted in transplant survival rates increasing from less than 50% to in excess of 98%. In Ohio, I met John Kempf, a young Amish guy who runs his own fertilizer and consultancy business. He emphasized the need to provide balanced nutrition for plants. Plants need in excess of 60 nutrients to express their full genetic potential, resulting in high-yielding, quality crops which are resistant to pests and diseases. A humus-rich, biologically active soil is essential for this level of nutrient supply. Moving to Vermont, I met Abe Collins. He was mob grazing cattle to achieve high growth rates and to build soil carbon. Abe stressed the importance of carbon-rich soils to the management of water and nutrients. Many soils are slumped and compacted, which results in the majority of rainfall running off the surface. This takes soil and nutrients with it, creating silting and nutrient loading of watercourses, not to mention the risk of flooding to those downstream. By increasing the carbon content of the soil, the humic substances bind the clay particles and give structure to the soil, making it open and friable. This allows the soil to absorb rainfall, with excess slowly entering the drains and groundwater, after having all the nutrients scrubbed from it by the humus. This keeps the water and nutrients in the soil and slows the path of excess water to the watercourses, so reducing the risk of flooding downstream. The water and nutrients retained in the soil are there for future crop growth. It's estimated that for every 1% you raise soil carbon levels, you can hold an extra 125,000 litres of water per hectare, or 10,000 gallons per acre in real money. This ability of humus to act as the soil's flywheel, absorbing water and nutrients in times of excess, and then giving them up when necessary for crop growth, is what builds resilience into a farm. With the more extreme weather patterns we are seeing at the moment, this is essential to sustainable food production. After a month at home, I went to Australia for a month, travelling the East Coast. In Australia, Hugh Lovell and Bill and Rhonda Daly again emphasised the importance of humus to build resilience into farms. The power of this approach was brought home to me when I met Graham Clay, a dairy farmer in southern Victoria, who had switched from using 300 kilograms of nitrogen per hectare per year to compost. He was now growing more, better quality pasture. His cows were more productive and healthier, as was his bottom line. One very happy man. At home this summer, I've changed my grazing management to achieve good animal performance and to feed the soil. The cows were kept on a 40-day rotation from early April to late October on a fixed area of pasture. 160 cows on 120 acres. This resulted in cows entering quite high covers, eating the best grass and trampling the rest, so feeding the soil. The quality and rate of regrowth has amazed me, resulting in higher forage production and utilisation than when we were grazing lower covers cleanly. As a result, later season growth has been better than usual, even though temperatures dropped away rapidly through September and October. In one 14-hectare field, which was soil sampled when sown to pasture, and again 5 years later, I've lifted soil organic matter levels from 4% to 8% using standard rotational grazing practices. This is equivalent to sequestering 20 tonnes of carbon per hectare per year, a figure which I think will be exceeded under the new grazing regime. I mixed last winter's farmyard manure with a heap of chopped straw to create 2 large compost heaps, which will be spread across a large area of the pasture, hopefully improving forage production and quality for next year. A move to spring calving, with the herd calving from January to March 2013, will show the real potential of this system to produce milk. This whole system relies on fertility, building sustainability. As farmers, our job is to capture sunlight and convert it into food, a biological process which, in the 20th century, we lost sight of in our rush to embrace chemistry. In the 21st century, we must harness the power of biology.